This is a home inspection and this is an appraisal report. They kind of look the same, don't they? But confusing the two, it's almost like confusing a grocery receipt with a nutrition label. One tells you what you paid for, the other tells you what's inside. By the way, I'm Nathan. I've earned 120 plus 5-star reviews by educating homebuyers through this process, plus my own experience buying and renovating over 15 units, just like this one here. By the end of this video, you'll know the exact differences between a home inspection and an appraisal. What we're gonna cover today is what they are, how much they are on average, and when I would use them. Plus, I'm gonna sprinkle in some pro tips that have helped me, so let's jump right into it. You know, on this channel, we like to keep things simple and easy to understand. So let me first explain what a home inspection is. It's a visual inspection of the home's health and safety. If we go one layer deeper, you might be wondering, what does the home inspection visually look for? So check this out. Here are the 9 major areas: roofing, exterior, interior, heating, cooling, electrical, structural, plumbing, and insulation. This is something I wish I would have known when I bought my first home. When we got the offer accepted, the real estate agent gave me a home inspection referral. So we got the general inspection scheduled, and you would think it's okay and we're all done because they're gonna check all 9 major areas, right? So we're all good. But here's the kicker. The general home inspector will check the areas visually, but they won't really do a deep dive in each of those components. What you actually need to do is, if they identify something, you'll need to order a specialist. The analogy I like to use is just like if you go to your primary care doctor and they identify something, let's just say with your heart, you obviously want to go to a cardiologist, that specialist, to really just do a deep dive and double click into what's really going on with the heart. Here's an example of one of the homes I purchased later on in my investing career. We identified that there was a plumbing issue because one of the bathrooms wasn't draining properly. So we ordered the general home inspector. Automatically, I knew that we should get a plumber specialist as well as a sewer scope. Sometimes the plumber will do it for you, but sometimes you might need to order like a sewer scope specialist, by the way. So we do go through that whole process during the due diligence stage. We identified that there are some roots growing in the pipes, and fortunately we got the sellers to give us seller credits to cover the cost of repairs, and we would actually do the repairs after closing. Little pro tip is, I always recommend, if you can, try to get the seller credits, because sometimes if the seller's selling the property, they may cut corners, right, and just do the bare minimum to remedy the fix. But if you get the funds and you fix it after you move in, you're probably gonna care more about fixing it correctly. So that's just a little quick side quest. And as promised, here's another bonus tip / pro tip. And I learned this from talking to the trades, so like your electrician, plumber, etc. So the common denominator was, if you're going to order those specialists, they recommended, and I also recommend it too because it makes sense, is staggering those appointments. So what do I mean by that? Is, let's say you have a specialist that comes in at 1 p.m. and you have the plumber comes in at 1 p.m., everybody comes in at 1 p.m. You'll probably realize there's gonna be too many cooks in the kitchen and people are gonna like stumbling over each other. So fundamentally, if I boiled it down, if I feel like I'm getting pressured, I may cut corners. Therefore, they're probably gonna do the same thing, and they may feel rushed and cut corners as well. So what I always recommend, stagger those specialist appointments if you can. Have the plumber go in at 1, electrician 1:30, 2:30, whatever, right, etc. and so on. So I hope that helps you during your home buying journey. Okay, now let's talk about how much is a home inspection. So I did some research. On average, it's about $200 to $500. In my personal experience, I've been spending around $400 to $500. And the other thing is, if you're buying a multi-family, you might think it's probably the same cost, but it's actually more. Those are usually around like $700 to $900. And the reason why is, if you think about it, if you buy a really big house, let's say it's 2,000 square feet, and then you buy a 4-unit, which has 2,000 square feet, you would think 2,000 square feet are the exact same, right? It should be the same exact price. Now with the big house, you're gonna have generally one kitchen and multiple bathrooms. And with the multi-unit, you're gonna have 4 times the kitchens and 4 times the bathrooms. So it's just something that you have to be mindful of, where the general home inspector will have to do essentially 4 times the work. And that's generally why
the home inspection is a little more for multi-units.
Okay, so you might be wondering, Nathan, this is great. I'm not buying a multi-unit, so is there any other rules of thumbs that I can use for my specific situation? That's exactly what we're gonna cover in this section. And what is the saying? Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man a fish, feed him for a lifetime, something like that, right? So this is the illustration that I made to show you the framework of general home inspections, okay? So you'll see we have a lower to higher cost and an average cost line, just kind of right down in the middle. What I'm showing is what features would lower your inspection from the average. Is it newer? Is it a smaller home? Is there only one structure, like no pool house, no guest house, etc., right? And you're not hiring a specialist inspector. On the flip side, what items could increase from the average? Things like, is the home older? Is the house larger in square feet? And is there multiple structures like a guest home, pool home, and other living units? And lastly, if you're hiring specialist inspectors like sewer, HVAC, and so on. Okay, let's move on to when I would use the home inspection. The first very common scenario is in a resale scenario, meaning you're buying it from someone who's already living in it. So this one is very easy. I would say yes, get a general home inspection, worth every penny, because you might find out that there's tons of other repairs that need to be done. So best case, you spend the $400 and you find out there's all these repairs and the seller repairs all of them, or you get a seller credit. Worst case, you spend the $400 and you get peace of mind that the house is pretty much flawless. The next scenario that I get asked about is new construction. So this isn't a popular opinion, but I would say yes, get a home inspection if you're getting new construction. So this has personally helped me when I bought a new construction and turned it into an Airbnb. And the general home inspector identified the HVAC system that was on the roof was not working properly. It was essentially leaking water onto the garage and essentially removing the paint, as well as the washer and dryer didn't have a proper draining system just in case it overflowed, because it was on the second floor, I believe. And if it overflowed, it would just flood the whole floor. So there wasn't a proper draining system identified. So that saved us a ton of headaches. So what I learned there is just because it's new doesn't mean it's flawless. Next is tear down. So if I'm tearing down the house all the way down to the dirt, essentially, would I get a home inspection? That would be a maybe. Let me explain. So first scenario is if you're going to tear it down and then move in right away, actually I would have the builder that's actually building the house go with you during the due diligence stage to make sure everything checks out. In that situation, I more than likely wouldn't recommend a general home inspection because the builder would essentially be the inspector, right? And then the other scenario is that I see quite a bit is if you're buying a house that you're going to tear down, right? Meaning you're not gonna move into it right away. Maybe it's a year or two from now because you're gonna pull permits, etc. And you might have a tenant in there right now. And in that situation, I would still get a general home inspection to check the health and safety if you plan on having a tenant and moving into it or tearing it down, a year to two from now. In that situation, I would say yes. Next, which is not commonly known, which is pre-warranty expiration. So what do I mean by that? When you buy a house, you usually get a home warranty. Let's say it's 12 months. Basically, if something major breaks in the house, usually it's like appliances. And I had this happen to my very first house in Florida, of course my luck. And the HVAC went out literally a week after I moved in. And I bought it in August. If you guys know anything about Florida, August is very hot. And that was about a $5,000 to $10,000 bill that I had to get a whole new thing. And I didn't get a home warranty. I should have learned that I should have got that. So in this situation, going back to this scenario, if I get a home warranty and it lasts for 12 months, the pre-warranty expiration just means that on the 11th month or 10th month or something like that, you have a general home inspector come in and you can let them know, hey, this is just for a pre-warranty expiration or just kind of like a skinny version of the general inspection. And they'll just check through the appliances and other major systems, the HVAC, etc., right? And if there's anything wrong, then you can actually claim it there. So that way you can get it fixed before the expiration of your home warranty, right? Because the last thing you want to do is what happened to me was your home warranty. Either you have one or you don't, but let's say it breaks after your home warranty, then you're essentially footing the bill. So in summary, for the pre-warranty expiration, if you have a warranty, get one. If you don't have a warranty, then obviously it doesn't make sense to get a pre-warranty expiration. So now that we covered the home inspection, let's go over the appraisal. So the appraisal checks the home value. So the inspection, just as a summary, is health and safety. It's very similar to the nutrition label, like what's inside, health and safety. And then the appraisal is how much you paid for it or what's the actual cost of the house. And so let's do a deep dive, okay? So this is something that I learned in my past career as an engineer. It was trust but verify, right? So trust that the listing agent selling the house did their due diligence, they find the fair market value for the house, etc. But you also know that their incentive is to sell the house as high as possible because that's their promise to the sellers or their client, right? So in this situation, we should trust them, but we want to verify, right? We want to verify with a third-party person that's not involved in the transaction, doesn't care what the results are, and that's where the appraiser comes into play, okay? So the key thing is, for most first-time homebuyers, they don't know this, is the appraiser does get ordered by the lender, but it's ordered third-party, meaning it's going to be independent and they get paid no matter what. So if the home value comes in low, meaning you're buying a house at 500K and it appraises for 450, crazy example, then essentially you have a few options, right? We'll do a different video on what options can happen based on that situation. But the appraiser does the fair market value, and you obviously may move forward with the property or you may not and cancel. And what I'm trying to describe is the appraiser will still get paid for their work because they're independent. So how much is an appraisal? So there's two different types. There's like a desktop and then there's a regular. So for the desktop, that's usually like for HELOCs, HELoans, private loans, hard money, etc. You might have a desktop, which is kind of a quick virtual appraisal of the house or checking the home value. Those are usually under $300. But if you're getting like a regular loan, I'm gonna call that defined as conventional, FHA, VA, jumbo USDA, things of that nature, the more popular loans, those are gonna be around $500 to $700 for an appraisal. Now, just like the home inspection section, we're gonna create a graph and show you the variables that would make a home appraisal more expensive or less expensive. Let's jump right into that. Also, if you've learned something, consider subscribing because you'll get more videos like this. So here's the graph that is a simple illustration. The goal is to teach you the frameworks here, right? So we'll start with the average cost, which is right in the center. Then what are some of the factors that lower the cost of an appraisal? That's gonna be location, type of home, and size of home. The biggest factor that I've seen is location. If you're buying a home in an area where there's lots of homes, easy to get to, keyword, there will be more appraisers willing to go to the property, which will drive the cost down. And size of home makes a difference, but in reality, not as much as location. So on the flip side, what would increase the appraisal? We have location again. If you're buying in a rural area, not lots of homes, and you have to travel quite a distance to the nearest city, an appraiser will more than likely add an extra cost for travel. And I usually see that in California, in Southern California, there's this popular vacation city called Big Bear. If you're ordering your appraisal, there's not many appraisers in Big Bear City specifically, so that you might have to go to Riverside or like Temecula or something like that. So next will be rush. What does this mean? Basically, if you're writing an offer that has a fast closing, I define fast as 21 days or less. The national average, by the way, is 42 days as of recording this, from contract to close. So there are certain situations where you may want to pay for a rush fee, okay? So you do get the report back sooner, which is the benefit of ordering a rush. Next will be type of home. Typically, if you're buying a multifamily and need market rents analyzed for qualification purposes, or you just want to know, that's going to be an added on cost for sure. Last is size of home, right? So crazy example would be comparing a $1,000 or 1,000 square foot house versus a 4,000 square foot house. Generally, once you get to a bigger square foot house, the appraiser is going to need more, call it walking distance, right? So that's where the cost would go up. And pro tip here, by the way, if you're getting a VA loan, the VA actually publishes the VA appraisal fee schedule, and I'll link to the website here. And this is the exact charges that the lenders will have to charge for the appraisal based on location, type of house, etc. Okay, let's move on to when I would need an appraisal. So in this situation, I'm going to change it up a little bit. So in the when column, we're actually going to replace that with essentially like loan program. So when equaling loan program. And then obviously the next column is the appraisal required. So these are all the loan programs you'll see on the list, and we'll go through each of them. VA, FHA, USDA, conventional, jumbo, second mortgages, private money, and so on. Okay, so when it comes to VA, you'll need an appraisal. That one's easy. FHA, appraisal's required, and USDA, appraisal's required too. So fundamentally, those are what's called a government type loan. Those are sponsored by government entities, VA, FHA, and USDA. In those situations, appraisals are pretty much always required, especially if you're buying a house or purchasing. If you're refinancing, there's streamlined options and stuff like that, but that's kind of out of the scope of this video. So if you're purchasing, that is a yes. And conventional, this is different, okay? This is a maybe. So what does that mean, right? So sometimes if you're putting 20% down or more, and there's lots of data on the value of the house, like if you're buying in a very populous area, you might get what's called an appraisal waiver, fancy word for the conventional loan investors have enough data and confidence that based on the purchase price that you're buying, that they don't need an appraisal. Essentially what that means is there's low risk on the value of the house, which is good. So a common question I get is, if I get an appraisal waiver, can I still get an appraisal, right? So yes, you can still get an appraisal. It doesn't mean if I get a waiver, I have to use it. It just is an option, right? So you could totally get another appraisal if you wanted to. But little thing to be mindful of, if you have an appraisal waiver and you're buying a $500,000 house and you're in contract for $500,000 and you get an appraisal and it comes in lower, like by like 10,000, because there's always some variance, then you have to go off the 490. It's not like you could just like throw away the appraisal and go backwards. So it's kind of like one of those things that's very hard to do the Control-Z or undo button, right? If you ordered appraisal and you had an appraisal waiver. Jumbo is the next section, which is a yes. Pretty much every jumbo loan investor, that's basically a loan amount above your conforming loan limits. As of recording this for 2025, that's about $806,000 and change. So if you're getting a loan limit, not purchase price, but a loan limit above that, that would be considered a jumbo loan. Now in other high cost areas like Southern California, etc., you may have what's called high balance, which means like, hey, you can still get a conventional loan up to, I think it's like 1.1 right now for San Diego. So if you get a loan limit above that, then that's jumbo. So it's almost like an extended loan limits for high cost areas like Hawaii too, and LA, etc. Next is second mortgages. This might be a maybe. So second mortgages are like HELOCs, HELoans, and most of the time, if you're not getting like a really big second mortgage, like it's a line of credit under $250,000, you may not need a full appraisal or an appraisal at all. So just be mindful of that. That is kind of a maybe because of the type and how much you're gonna borrow in the second mortgage. Private money, this is a case by case, so I'm gonna put maybe as well here. Some private lenders don't care because there's enough data. Some do, so that's just something you have to check with the lender. And here's a pro tip that I got asked from a client that's going through the process right now, and I wanted to include this in the video as I was recording this, right? So he asked, does the home inspector talk to the appraiser? So the short answer is usually not. And I know it's kind of weird because they kind of should be working together, but essentially what happens is if you order a home inspection, it's kind of like in a separate lane. And then on the appraiser side, it's kind of like in this separate lane with the lender, right? So the lender just wants to look at the appraisal report, call it a day. If they saw the home inspection, that may open up a can of worms for sure, because what they're assuming is that you're buying pretty much a flawless property, or if it's not flawless, it's already baked into the price. So they already assume if I'm buying it at $500,000 as an example, and it's not $600K because it's not a new construction or like brand new, then it's already baked into the price, I guess, if that makes sense. So I know it's a little weird. So If the appraiser does point out though, like there's a foundation issue and it's pretty glaring, then it does need to get fixed no matter what before you close. But that's pretty rare, right? So I'll give you another example. If the home inspector pointed out that there was roofing issues, right? The appraiser actually doesn't go into the attic, doesn't climb on the roof or anything like that. The appraiser's there to check the quality of the work as well as the condition of the house and use that to identify other houses in the area that are similar to compare the value to. So in short, the appraiser will get a general assessment of the house, enough to categorize it so that way when they find other houses in the same category, they can compare the value. All right, we covered the differences between a home inspection and an appraisal. Remember, the home inspection is very similar to a nutrition label. It tells you what's inside, the health, wellness, and safety of the house. And then the appraisal is just like a receipt. It tells you what you paid for, how much it costs, what's the fair market value for the house. So with that being said, if you find value out of the video, give this video a like. And by the way, YouTube's recommending this video right over here. Feel free to give it a click. And as always, I'm rooting for you. This is Nathan, signing out.